Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokémon Origins. Today we're going to be looking at Magby, Magmar and Magmortar, so let's get going. First up, looking at Magby, or in Japanese, Booby, spelt with a U, not a double O. It is the live cold Pokemon and is number 240 in the National Dex. Magby stands at 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches tall and weighs 21.4 kilograms or 47.2 pounds. Magby is a pure fire type. Now, Magby is a bipedal Pokemon that has a red body with a yellow flame shaped marking on its stomach. Its head is covered in large lumps and it has a rounded yellow beak. There is a single spike on its back and it has a tapered tail. Its short arms have 3 clawed fingers, while its feet have only 2 clawed toes. Magby, it seems to be a combination of a booby, which is a type of seabird, or a duck, with a mythical salamander of fire. Also, the single spike on its back gives some resemblance to a baby iguana. There are no gender differences between Magby, and Magby's shiny form is a golden colour with a very slight difference on its chest colour. It's just that bit much lighter. And Pokédex entries tell us that Magby has magma-like blood which circulates through its body, and that its body heat can be over 1100 degrees Fahrenheit or 600 degrees Celsius. The name Booby may be a combination of booby as in the type of seabird, as I've already mentioned, and baby, which refers to it being the baby stage in its evolution line. The name Magby, however, is a combination of magma, which is molten rock, and baby, and it could also be a corruption of maybe. And now if we move on to looking at Magby's sprites throughout the years, it was first introduced in Generation 2, and we can see in Gold, Silver and Crystal it has a fairly simple stance, standing up straight in Silver, and breathing a bit of fire and leaning over in Gold. Crystal's sprite is just a mix between the two, really. However, in Crystal sprite you can see its normal form does get that much paler compared to Gold and Silver for some reason. The back sprite in this generation seems to be, also uses the colouring of Gold and Silver, but the Crystal back sprite may use the colouring of Crystal, obviously. But all we can see here is its head and the spike on its back. Its hand almost seems to be like going backwards towards the camera, which is really quite strange. But yeah, you can see its tail there as well. Moving then to Generation 3, we can see in all of the games it has the same stance, or a similar stance at least. It seems to be, standing there, and then in Emerald it jumps up a bit, and the back sprite here is the same back sprite as the Generation 2, but just recoloured a bit. Then in Generation 4 it gains, in Diamond, Pearl and Platinum it is the same sprite pretty much as in Generation 3, nothing's changing there really, just been touched up slightly. And then in Heart Gold and Soul Silver it gains a similar sprite, but it's more standing up rather than moving forward, and it's just looking almost confused. The back sprite for this generation is similar to the previous back sprites, however its arm is not going backwards now, it's going forwards, and yeah, that's really all the difference there is. And then in Generation 5 we can see it uses a similar sprite to the ones used in Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, just with a few colour changes. Actually it's exactly the same as Platinum, I believe. And then the back sprite here we can see, the whole of Magby's body, nothing really changed there. It seems to be a bit slimmer in its back sprite than it was in previous version, however. And finally for Magby, if we look at its size, standing at 0.7 meters or 2 foot 4 inches, it's a medium-sized Pokemon. It's about half the size of Ash, if not a bit more. So it's not tiny, but it is pretty big, I'd say, for a baby form. Now if we want to look at Magmar, Magby's evolution, we can see its Japanese name is Booba, so again there's going to be some jokes in the comments below. It is the Spitfire Pokemon, and number 126 in the National Dex, being introduced a generation earlier than Magby in Generation 1. It stands at 1.3 meters or 4 foot 3 inches, and weighs 44.5 kilograms or 98.1 pounds. Magmar, like Magby, is a pure fire type, and a Magby will evolve into a Magmar starting at level 30. Magmar is a bipedal Pokemon with a red body that has a yellow flame design on it. A row of red spikes run down its back, and there are 2 lumps on its forehead with a flame on top of each one. It has a puckered beak and small eyes, and it has yellow thighs with red feet with 2 clawed toes on each. Its arms are covered in rigid red scales, and it has red hands with 5 clawed fingers. It also has black metal shackles on its neck and ankles, and at the tip of its tail is a yellow flame. Magmar, similar to Magby, is a combination of a booby or a duck with a mythical salamander of fire. However, the tail and the spikes on its back resemble those of an iguana. Also, it is likely based on a Karura, considering that its counterpart Electabuzz is based on an Oni, and these two creatures, I suppose you could call them, are related. There are no gender differences between Magmar, and Magmar's shiny form has a paler red body with pinkish flame designs on it. And Pokédex entries tell us that Magmar dislike cold places, and also that they create heat waves around their body, making them hard to see. The Japanese name Booba may be a combination of booby, again referring to a type of seabird, and a corruption of burn. Magmar, on the other hand, may be a corruption of the word magma, but may also involve the word mar, which means to damage or spoil, which refers to the incineration of its surroundings to suit its own needs. And now if we take a look at the sprites throughout the generations, as I mentioned earlier, Magmar was introduced in Generation 1, not Generation 2 like Magby, and we can see in red and green it had, well, it looks exactly the same as it does in future games really, a few alterations obviously, but we can easily tell it's a Magmar. Then in red and blue it has a very different sprite, one you wouldn't see nowadays, where it's pretty much jumping almost straight at the camera and not standing at all. Then in yellow it gains much deeper red colours and stands up and seems to be dancing around, I don't even know. Then the back sprite of Generation 1 here we can see is, well, you can see its spikes clearly on its back, and also the two lumps on its head with the flames on are very prominent on its design. It also seems to have very thin arms in its back sprite there. Then in Generation 2, in Gold, Silver and Crystal, they all seem to be using the same sort of sprite, crouched over, hunched over, etc. And we can see that when it switches from Gold and Silver to Crystal, it gains, well, it's much more of a deeper red colour I guess, rather than the pale red, and the yellow is a bit more of a pale yellow as well. Then in the back sprite for this generation we can see there are actually two back sprites here, one for Gold and Silver and then one for Crystal. The only change between the two sprites I believe is on the lips for Magmar, whereas in Gold and Silver they're very large, whereas in Crystal they are much more smooth like a beak. Then in Generation 3, in Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, it has a very weird sprite I guess you could say. It's similar to the Gold and Silver sprites, where it's sort of hunched over slightly with its arms raised up, and then in Fire Red and Leaf Green it sort of flips this sprite over, and then has its arms down, and the tail is like the other side of it I guess. The back sprite here is a recoloration of the Crystal back sprite we saw just now I believe. Then in Generation 4, in Diamond and Pearl, it raises its arms up like it's shouting or whatever, and then in Platinum it sort of crouches over again, much like it was in Generation 2, and then in Heart Gold and Soul Silver it jumps up again and spreads its arms out like it's performing in a play. The back sprite for this generation we can see a lot more of Magmar than before, and it also seems to have much more of a glare to it, with its lumps sort of acting as ways to make it look angry and furious. The back sprite here, as I said, you can see that the spikes are sort of much more spaced out and defined, whereas previous generations they were sort of bunched together and very similar to each other. And then finally in Generation 5 we can see this uses the Diamond Pearl sprite, very similar with its arms raised up, and obviously the animation moves around a bit. The back sprite here is pretty much just the same sprite flipped over, and you can even see its hands sort of splayed back with its claws reaching out. Finally for Magmar, if we look at its size, standing at 1.3 meters or 4 foot 3 inches, it's just a bit smaller than Ash, not a whole lot though, all around the same size generally, and it's still about 2 foot smaller than me, so it's not a huge Pokemon, but it's pretty damn large. Finally for today we're moving on to Magmortar, which is the evolution of Magmar. Its Japanese name is Booburn, so again, very similar to the previous ones. It is the Blast Pokemon and number 467 in the National Dex, being introduced in Generation 4. Now, if we look at its height, we can see it stands at 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches and weighs 68 kilograms or 149.9 pounds. Magmortar, like its pre-evolutions, is a pure fire type, and a Magmar will evolve into a Magmortar when traded holding a Magmarizer. Magmortar is a large, vaguely humanoid, red and yellow striped Pokemon with an egg-shaped body. It has pink lips on its dark face and yellow tubular arms with 3 small claws on each arm or hand I guess you could say. When Magmortar prepares to shoot fire from its hands, the claws disappear into its skin, forming something that's similar to a cannon. Its legs are small in proportion to its body, with pink thighs, red feet and black shackles around the ankles. It has one large flame on its head, as well as large flames on its shoulders and tail. Additionally, it has 4 pink spikes on its back. Magmortar seems to be a buffed up version of its pre-evolution's inspiration, the Karura. It also has features of a duck or a booby, as well as a mythical salamander. There are no gender differences between Magmortar, and Magmortar's shiny form seems to have, much like Magmar's shiny form, a paler red body, or actually a similarly coloured red body actually this time, but still a bit paler, and pinkish flame designs like Magmar. Pokédex entries tell us that Magmortar's breath sears and sizzles, and that it can launch fireballs of up to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit or 2,000 degrees Celsius. The Japanese name Booburn is a combination of booby, type of seabird, and burn. Magmortar, the English name, may be a combination of Magma and Mortar, which refers to how it shoots fireballs from its cannon-like arms. Then looking at sprites throughout the generations, it was introduced in Generation 4, and in Diamond and Pearl it has a very simple sprite, just standing there really, not doing a whole lot. You can see some of its claws coming out of its hand there. Then in Platinum, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it gets a much more active one, aiming a cannon at the audience or the camera, and its claws, as you can see, have retracted in, and it looks like it's just about to shoot a fireball right at you, so I'd get out of the way if I were you. The back sprite here seems to be, well, just the back really. You can see the 4 spikes on the back, not a whole lot to talk about. Then in Generation 5 it gets, a sort of mix of the Diamond, Pearl and then Platinum sprites, where it doesn't have a arm going up, in the static sprite at least, whereas it does actually sort of have the similar stats to the first one, but moves its arm back a bit. You might have noticed, guys, in the original Diamond Pearl sprite as well, it didn't really have a visible tail or fire coming from beneath it, whereas now it does. The back sprite for this generation is, well, you can see the fiery tail coming off the back, 4 spikes on the back, and you can see it's a very large Pokemon body-wise. Finally for today, let's look at Magmortar's size when compared to me, Ash, Magby and Magmar, and we can see it stands at 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches, which makes it just a bit smaller than me. However, in the sprite comparison, you can see the tops of its fire does hit around the same height as me though. So guys, that's it for this episode of Pokemon Origins. I hope you enjoyed it. Much appreciated if you leave a like and a comment down below, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you guys. Bye.